Welcome back, everyone. In the last video we did a discussion of the element of value, and we focused on how the light affects the surface of an object. Okay, so we looked at a lot of different examples, and today what I thought we'd do is I want to take some of those examples that we saw in the previous video, and we're actually going to take that knowledge and we're going to apply it to our drawings, right? I'm going to show you two different light sources on one object, and then I'm going to show you one object that's a little bit more complex so that you can see how the light is affecting the object so that you can actually draw it and shading based on what you're actually seeing. I'll go ahead and put a little link to that value video there, so if you want to see the actual examples that I'm going to be using, you can check it out on that video. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch camera angles and then we'll get started. Alright, so let me show you what we're going to try to do today. So what I did is I took 3 still images from the video, last week's video on value. And I'm going to be using these images to show you how the values change when I change the light source. Okay, so we're going to try to do this one, which both, it's the same object with 2 different light sources. And then we're going to try to do Frank, which is a single light source, but because he's got so many different parts, it's got all kinds of lights and shadows and cast shadows. And so this one will be fun to do. All right, so let's start with the first one. These are not going to be super big, and this is not a drawing tutorial. We're going to focus on value, in this case shading, because we're going to do it in pencil. So if you want to see more on drawing, check out some of my other videos that give you the basics of drawing. Okay, so I'm going to have this off camera, but this image came directly from the previous video on value. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a simple sketch. I'm going to do both of them on the same page of the vase that we're going to be working with. Okay, so I'm going to speed through this part because, like I said, this tutorial is really about shading, not so much about drawing, but just kind of show you how I deal with this. So I'm going to start off with a rectangle, and then I got this little piece right here that's going to be turned into the top portion. So I started with a rectangle just to get my proportions. Then I'm going to start to shape it. So up here, on this part right here, is the actual opening. And then it curls down this way, and then it hooks this way. Now this is not a perfectly straight line, there's some curvature to it. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to very, very lightly curve this inward. And this is a symmetrical piece, so I'm going to try to keep it fairly symmetrical. And then the base is not straight across because it's a cylinder, so I want to make sure that I round this off. Okay. And then it's got 2 bands here, and those also are rounded because it's a cylinder, so we got to make them look like they're going around the vase. Okay. That goes back to our cross contours. So if you want to know more about cross contours, check out that video that I have on there. That helps you use lines to make things look 3-dimensional. Now we can see the inside of this. There's some thickness to it. So here, there's a thick area here. And then the back, since it's further away from us, has to be a little bit thinner. And then this, I need to curve that more. It's a little too straight. And I think I want to curve this more. It's too straight. Alright, so that's my basic drawing. I'm going to do another one here off camera, and then we'll be back to start the shading part. Alright, now that we got both of these drawn out, and yes, I know they're not symmetrical, or they're not identical, and that's okay. Just remember, this is all about practicing shading. Now, on this first one, actually before we do that, the box that it was sitting on with the cloth was kind of there, and there's a wrinkle here. So on this one here, what I did in the photograph, I took and I put the light source way down here, really low, and it was super intense, super bright. So I'm going to go ahead and label that this way. And just so that there's no confusion, I'm going to split the two. So this is for that one, not for this one. Okay. Now, because of the way that the light is hitting this, and this is a rounded object, this area here, and I'm going to lightly put it in there, is where the shadow is going to be, that deep core shadow. It's actually going to be here, right? It's not going to be straight, right? Because this is a rounded object. There's a little bit of a reflective highlight here. Notice I'm putting these lines in super soft. There's a reason for it, okay? And then the light is hitting here, and this is actually blocking here. So you're getting a cast shadow here, and then right here, right about here, you can see the light again. So this is a very dramatic lighting effect because of the location of the light. So there's not a lot of value changes in this one. You have this area that is super bright. You have this area that's really nice and dark. You have some midtones in this area here. And the cast shadow from the box and from the vase itself is actually does this. And then this like here. That's it. So once you do that, it's pretty easy to just go ahead and start shading. So for shading today, I'm just going to work with some shading pencils, but you can use whatever you have. You don't need any special equipment to do this. And then if you want to make the area softer, you can use blending stumps, or you can use tissues, or you can use Q-tips, or you can just do it without. I've done it both ways. So, all right, here we go. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to establish my midtones, right? So I'm going to take my 6B. I'm just going to work with the 6B today for this first one. And I don't like to start in super dark right away because they're difficult to erase if you make a mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a midtone. And notice I didn't make the outlines dark. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of students make is they right away make the outlines really dark, and then it becomes more like a cartoon drawing. When you're trying to create realism, you actually don't want to see a bunch of outlines. What you want to see is contrast. Okay? So this area is super bright, but then in the background here, there's a midtone. So I'm not going to do the entire area, but I'm going to use enough of the midtone to separate the vase from the background. So I'm just going to do that right there. So just by doing this right here, now I've separated this part of the vase from this right here. And I can soften it with the tissue here in a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead, and these lines here, they're very dark. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in, right? Because they're actually grooves that have been cut into the base. So here I do want to see these lines nice and dark. Okay. Now I'm going to continue this value here, and then the cast shadow, which is here, is going to be darker. So again, I'm kind of staying with my midtones first, and then I'm going to build up from there. So since this is a big area, I'm just going to use this tissue just to soften it up a little bit. And then I'm going to focus on the vase, because the vase is our focal point. Okay. All right, now let's start building up these deep shadows. So all of this area here, like this, right here, because the light is coming from down here, it's super dark up there, right? So I can actually start to build this up. Just like so. And then it starts to come in this direction. And when I shade, as you saw in one of the other videos, I like to use the side of the lead as much as possible to minimize scratching the paper. Makes it very, very easy to blend if you don't scratch the paper. I want to keep this line soft, right? It's not a hard line. It's a very soft edge. There's not a lot of gradation, so I want to keep that separation, but I want to make sure that that line is soft. Where here, on this outer edge, the line is very sharp, very crisp. So I am going to use the tip of my pencil and really sharpen up this edge here. Now I don't want an outline, so what I do is once I have that edge sharpened up, then I'm going to blend it into the shadow. And again, I'm used to little circular strokes. By the way, when you're shading, avoid swiping with your hands because you will smudge all of your work. So there's that right there. Now we can always come back and tweak it. Now this was a reflective light, right? Because the light is kind of hitting this blanket and it's bouncing up a little bit. So this little section here will not be as dark as this right here. It's still in the shadow side of the vase, but it's got a little reflection. And then here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to soften this edge even more. So I'm just using medium pressure, little circular strokes, and just creating a nice soft edge. Here, right here, this actually tells me this right here where the lip of this vase is, I actually need to bring that shadow all the way to there because that's the top part of the shadow, or excuse me, the top part of the vase, and the top part of the vase is actually in shadow because of the location of the light source. Now I need to get rid of that outline. So whenever you need, I drew it too dark. So I'm just going to take a kneaded eraser and I'm going to soften this line right here. Okay. Now I need to clean up this edge a little bit, but when I clean up this edge, because this is on the highlight side, I need to be careful not to create a hard outline. So all I'm doing is creating contrast instead. So I'm getting this edge to blend. And because now I'm getting to a tight area, I'm going to use my little blending stump to blend it into the background. I can always add more in the background. So now I'm intentionally not going to do that because I really want that vase to stand out, so I'm not going to smooth out the vase. Now right here, because the light's coming this way and up, this is actually part of the cast shadow of the table, and this is the cast shadow of the vase. And then where the vase meets the table here, there's a little bit of a shadow here, and then all of this will be part of the cast shadow. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn my paper a little bit, and When you do shadows, remember, please don't outline them. Okay, it makes it look very strange. Shadows don't really have outlines, they just get dark. All right, and I'm going to extend that over to this side. Because the edge of this box is really sharp, the cast shadow here, that line stays relatively sharp. But when we get to the cast shadow of the vase, it's actually very broken. A lot of light is bouncing off the blanket. Now for the blanket, I'm going to keep it relatively simple. So this here is the mid-tone. And then when we get to this side, it starts to get darker. But based on the image, it's not as dark as the one on the back. But it is dark right here. And it's going this direction, right? Based on the light source, it's got to go this direction. And then there's where the vase and the table meet, there's a little thin shadow right here. And then here, this part of the blanket, since it was really close to the light, is much lighter. Except here, there's a highlight here, and then opposite of that, there's a shadow because that was a crease. So the crease is actually creating a little shadow on the left side and a highlight on the right side. So it kind of look like that. And then the last thing to do, and I'm gonna spin this upside down so that my hand is not smudging. So apologize for this. This is going to be dark, but when it gets here, I have to make sure that it's kind of faded. So right here, I can start off really nice and dark, again using the side of the lead. And it's a cast shadow, so I'm not going to spend as much time making it like beautiful and whatnot, right? Because the focal point is the vase. And then here, I want to make sure that this area here stays soft. And this is, again, based on observation from the image. So my lead style, I'm going to have to sharpen my lead here. That's one thing about working with the side of the lead. You can see it eats it up pretty quick. So from time to time, you're going to have to stop and sharpen up the blade. Keep it nice and long when you do this, when you're using the side. All right, and then on this side, hardly anything at all, right? Just based on the image, there's just a little bit here because there's nothing blocking the light on this side, so the light's hitting that background very easily. And again, since the background is not the focal point, I want to make sure that I keep that nice and soft. A little bit of fine tuning, like right here. The shadow needs to come out a little bit more as it goes away from that. And I would say that that's pretty close to what we're looking at. Okay, on the second image, we have a completely different light source, right? It's coming more from the top right, and it's a different intensity. So we're actually going to see more midtones, a few little bit brighter highlights, and the shadow won't be as deep. So just like when we did this one, the first thing that I want to do is I kind of want to get a general layout of where the deep shadows are going to be. Let's start with that. So here, because the light's coming this way, there's a shadow here, but the shadow follows the cross contours of the vase. So there's a shadow here. And then when it gets here, it gets really close to the edge. And then it comes down this way, not quite to the center. And then it fades, and then there's a huge reflective light here because the light's coming down, so it's bouncing off the blanket and it's getting much more of a reflection than the one on this side. The cast shadow is, because this image is the cast shadow, or excuse me, the light source is almost directly above, the cast shadow is actually straighter. It's actually about here, right? And then you can't see it, but where the edge of the table is, it actually drops down. The edge of the table on this side is here. And then we have the blanket in the background, okay? Now, there is midtones on this one, right? So we're gonna fade this shadow going this way. And the brightest area is actually where the shoulder is, where it's facing up. There's a bright area right here. There's also the bright area here in the upper half here. And actually this is not drawn correctly, but we're not gonna worry about that right now. But the highlight here, because both this neck and this shoulder here are both facing up. So we have those highlights there. And then of course these lines, for the most part, stay pretty dark. There is a little bit of dimensionality here, so we can actually see a little bit of a highlight here and here. Okay. So on this one, I'm just going to focus on the base, just for the sake of time, and then show you guys the difference, so you guys can actually see the difference. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my 6B. And once again, I'm going to start with my midtones. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this real quick. Okay, so this area here is in shadow, but it's not as dark as this one because the lighting on this one is not as dramatic. There's a shadow going inside here because the light can get in. So that means this part is blocking the light, so there's a shadow on this side, but it gets on the inside, so this side is actually lighter. Just like so. And then this comes down. Again, keep these edges soft because we're going to blend them. Okay, we're not trying to do outlines. We're trying to see the entire image just through the use of contrast. Right? When we get to the reflective light, go lighter again. Take this right up to that edge. And then here, the darkest area is actually not on the edge, but just inside of it. There's a little bit of a reflective light on the outer edge, so we don't want that to get too dark. So we want that, just a tiny bit of a glow there. So you can see already how much different this is than that. Now, oops, there's another highlight here which I missed. So on this right here, it's actually going to go into a mid-tone. So even though I'm sticking with my 6B, I'm really softening up this edge, or softening up the pressure. And I am going to do a little bit of blending on this one. And this kind of curls down just a little bit, so the bottom is a little bit darker. I just realized I forgot to put the band. There's a band down here, but it's not a big deal. Okay. Okay, so now we can start building this up a little bit. So this little piece right here is a little stronger. The shadow's a little stronger here. And that's because of the way that this bends. The neck is actually casting a shadow. There we go. Now I'm going to blend this and then pull the highlight. So using my tissue, because this is kind of a big area, I'm going to go ahead and kind of do a little bit of soft blend. And when I blend with the tissue, I like to use little circular strokes. And then I will go back and add some shadows, because you're going to lose some of your shadows when you do this. Now here, this area is too small for me to use the tissue, so I'm going to use the blending stump. You can also use the blending stump for the whole thing. It really kind of depends on your style. Some artists like to leave the texture, some artists like a softer look, so it's up to you guys. The key is trying to create all of this with just shadows. So like you can see right here where I lost a lot of those deeper shadows, so I'll go back and put those in. So back to the 6B and build this up a little bit more. And always fade. Now, I'll put these marks back in so we don't lose them. Before we lose them, especially when we work with the dark shadows. Okay. Now, for the cast shadow here is not nearly as dark as the one on the left. Again, and that's because of the location of the light source. And it comes, the darkest part is actually right here, where the vase and the blanket meet. There's a really deep shadow right there. And then it starts to come out this way. And then as it goes away from the base, it starts to get just a little bit lighter. The rest of the blanket is light. It was like a bluish blanket that I was using, so that part of the blanket is pretty light. Soften it up. And the back there, that's all part of the blanket also, but I'm not gonna go into that. It's just pretty straightforward. What I do want to do is I want to put in a little bit more of a highlight, or excuse me, I want to blend this out more because I'm actually going to use my kneaded eraser to pull the highlight. So there's a highlight here. This one actually stayed pretty good. I was able to keep that, so I don't have to do anything with that one. Okay, and the reason that I like to use a kneaded eraser when we do this is because a kneaded eraser lifts the graphite. So I'm just taking my kneaded eraser and pulling up that highlight. When it gets dirty, just knead it, go to a new spot. And there's another highlight right about here, not as big. And it kind of touches right there. And then right here, there's a little bit right here. Because this part is actually facing a lot of the light source. And that's about it. Just pull that up a little bit. So when you look at these two side by side, because we have different light sources, the effects have to be drawn completely different. Now you do not have to make it soft like I did, right? But you do want to show more midtones, highlights, deep shadows on this one, more so than this one. This one is mostly, there's only 3 values on this one. You have your really darks, your really lights, and your midtones. Okay. All right, on the next one, we're going to look at Frank, the mannequin, my buddy, and because of the pose that I had him on, there's all kinds of stuff going on that one.